recently there was a statement that the Pope mentioned that all paths or all religions are paths to God. And he talks about the fact that they're kind of like different languages to reach God. And obviously, he erred, right? This is one of the things we read in the first reading today in Galatians, where Paul has to correct Peter. And it's not in any way, shape, or form a derogatory way of speaking to Peter. It's one of the errors that you see within media often. People attack Pope Francis instead of just recognizing he's a human who sometimes errs. And the church understands the Pope when he speaks ex cathedra as infallible, not when he speaks off the cuff. So this is a very disordered way of thinking that most people think about the Pope. They think every word he speaks is this a kind of infallible word, which is very disordered and thinking and very unhuman. So one of the things that the church does teach, though, is that the seeds of truth and goodness that exist in other religions are gifts of grace, of the one mediation of Christ, and of his spirit of holiness. So in other religions, we do find truth sometimes even about God, sometimes truth on how to live a holy life, which are graces or gifts from the one mediation of Christ. And it goes on to say in the Vatican website that with regard to the universal salvific action of the Holy Spirit, it is restated that the Spirit working after Jesus' resurrection is always the Spirit of Christ sent by the Father, who works in a salvific way also outside the visible church. This is how the church speaks about God in himself. He binds himself to the sacraments for our salvation, and entering into the church and receiving the sacraments is the ordinary way of salvation, and all people are called into the church. But obviously not all people die within that state of grace in some respect. But so there's also this extraordinary way of salvation where God, who himself, since he's God, he's not bound to the sacrament. So he binds himself to the sacraments for our salvation, but he's not bound himself. And he can save outside the church because he's God himself, and he has this real desire for the salvation of all humanity. So that's an important distinction that we kind of make. But it goes on on the website. Since the church is sign and instrument of salvation for all people, the opinion that various religions are ways of salvation complementary to the church is rejected as erroneous. And it goes on, while recognizing that elements of truth and goodness exist in other religions, there are no grounds in Catholic theology for considering these religions as such as ways of salvation, especially since they contain omissions, inadequacies, and errors regarding fundamental truths about God, man, and the world. Nor can their sacred texts be considered complementary to the Old Testament, which is the immediate preparation for the Christ event. So this is the truth about the whole situation. And anytime the Pope kind of errs off the cuff, we should always still love him and care for him and just gently correct and not be arrogant or prideful in our way of speaking toward the Holy Father. But always pray for him and pray for one another as we correct each other sometimes on our journey. And always pray for the salvation of all, that they may enter into the church and experience the fullness of faith, the fullness of truth, the fullness of salvation through the sacramental life of the church, where God is found and understood properly, and salvation is experienced through the sacramental life. God bless.